Hi guys, welcome to a very special video. Now, over the past few years, I've enjoyed many games, including fighting and rhythm games, but I also enjoy playing racing games from time to time. Ever since I was little, I enjoyed racing games, such as Ridge Racer, but then it became more interested to me when it came to kart racing games. Now, games such as Mario Kart Wii, but then releases such as Mario Kart 8, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, and Hot Wheels Unleashed return me back to those fun times. But out of all these games, there was one that stuck out to me, and I came back to this game for a fun session or to test myself while learning every single character and every single track in the game. This game is none other than Shrek Smash and Crash Race. Just kidding, it's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This is my favorite racing game today, and I'll do something unique that no one has done yet. Wait, something feels off. Oh, I know. Much better. But as you see, I have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe booted up next to me, and eventually I'll have some of my Hot Wheels to represent the different choices and the tracks that I'll be talking about, because I'm going to be talking about my favorite racing game today, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is one of, if not my favorite racing games to play of all time. This game holds so many memories for me, as I would routinely play this after one of my closest friends left for another location with their family. And I'd use this to play modes such as Grand Prix and time trials, starting before my classes in high school. Well, to be more specific, it would be the original 8 version. But I also remember playing this when the original Wii U DLC came out, along with Link and Animal Crossing, were those new characters added into the game, alongside brand new additional characters, courses, and car customizations, as well as a Mercedes-Benz collaboration, and also 200cc. Even after the popularity died down with this game on the Wii U, I still went back to playing this game until the release of 8 Deluxe in April 28th of 2017. Afterward, as an adult, I would be able to purchase my own stuff. In 2019, I saved up for the Switch, and the first game I bought was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe alongside Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. I relived my high school memories grinding all of the Grand Prix modes, the time trial modes again, as well as the updated game system. So, along with an updated battle mode, having the ability to hold 2 items, 200cc again, well, in time trials now, and 5 new characters, 6 if you include Gold Mario, the game kept improving to be more fun to play, soon overtaking Mario Kart Wii as my favorite game in the series. However, with the announcement of the Booster Course Pass that would be released in March of 2022, I was all the more stoked, as the game will double its number of courses to 96 from its original 48 in the Deluxe Edition. At first I was hesitant because of the poor graphics and the fact that they didn't include the base game's designs, but over time I came to accept and appreciate the newer tracks. Now with 96 tracks and 8 new characters, custom items, and a jukebox mode, all the more this game ends up becoming my favorite racing game of all time. So with this game, Mario Kart 8 being 10 years old, as of May 30th, 2024, well, specifically in the North American release, I wanted to have my own take on ranking all 96 tracks in the game based on my opinion. Now, I know I will have some controversial takes on some specific track placements, but it's all based on how much I enjoy racing on them, the music, and the design slash overall layout. Now, I'll also be discussing about some positives and negatives with these tracks based on a casual player's perspective and how fun it is to race on time trial modes as well. Because for me personally, I don't play on online services, but also please take a note that I'm only basing my thoughts on the game and not on the actual locations, especially with the tour tracks, so as not to offend anyone. But remember that my list could change over time because not all rankings stay permanent, as these are how I currently place everything since Mario Kart 8's 10th anniversary. So without further ado, here is my personal ranking of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's 96 courses from worst to best. Oh, by the way, try to count how many times I would say the word fun in this video. 96, SNES Mario Circuit 3. Now, many of you think another track would place this low on my list, but we'll get to that shortly. If Mario Kart 8 Deluxe weren't my favorite game, Wii would have been my next. My least favorite track in that game was SNES Mario Circuit 3 because of how bland the track looked. So it was no surprise that I would end up despising this track again when it was included in the Booster Course Pass. But don't get me wrong, it's still fun to race on, especially with that one U-turn and a number of shortcuts you could try to pull off. But literally any other track is more fun to race on because there's nothing that stands out on this track towards me. It's basically a copy and paste from Wii added to the Booster Course Pass. This track literally looks the same as other and better SNES tracks were already added to the game. The music already sounds the same as in Wii's too, and the graphics look just as dull and boring as they have in Wii's. Now, it would have been a perfect opportunity to finally add in SNES Mario Circuit 4 too, since it hasn't appeared in any past Mario Kart games. If they replaced this track with another low-tier track like any of the SNES Vanilla Lakes or switched it with the better SNES Mario Circuit 2, this would have ranked higher on my list. But for now, this Wii Retro is the low tier that ranks as the worst track in this game for me. 95, 3DS Toad Circuit. Now, this track would have been everyone's worst track for the game. Now, it was also the reason why I originally hesitated to purchase the Booster Course Pass. But the number one thing that stands out to me, and it's not in a very good way, are the graphics, as the designs look lazy compared to the graphics shown literally in any other circuit in the base game. Otherwise, the music is a good bop to it. It's just basically another figure 8 like track with lame visuals and a boring layout. 94, Tour Tokyo Blur. As a place I want to visit one day, this track doesn't do justice. Compared to the other tour tracks in the game, this track is just straight up lame. At least there's an element on other tour tracks that makes it feel like I'm visually racing on that location, but Tokyo Blur feels like I'm racing on a NASCAR track as I'm only racing on the streets and plain roads. I mean, the music is decent, but it also doesn't speak out to me as much. I don't know how it is compared to the tour game because I don't really play gacha games, but otherwise this track doesn't do Tokyo any favors other than being a boring track to race on and for being a complete blur to me. Yes, pun intended. But I'm still hoping to have the chance to actually visit the real life location of Tokyo one day. Time will tell. 93, Excite Bike Arena. Now, this may be a controversial take, but I do not like Excite Bike Arena. It's just an oval with changed up trick ramps for every single race. Nothing is interesting about this to me, not even the music. But, however, it's cool that former Nintendo titles are being represented in their current games, so I give it all the respect that it deserves. But this track is one of the most boring tracks to race on. Again, nothing speaks out to me, and other than the track being oval shaped, that's just filled with trick ramps. It's the worst track from the original Wii U DLC, and the worst in the base 8 Deluxe track selection. 92, Sky High Sunday. Unlike Excite Bike Arena, at least Sky High Sunday looks pretty visually, and the music slaps hard, especially with that bass. However, it's just another oval, but with more stuff added to it, such as a gliding section in the beginning and high ramps to trick off of towards the latter half. Plus, being in anti-gravity the entire time is pretty unique, like another oval track that I'll get to eventually. But one thing that irritates me about this track is hitting those poles or those guardrails and getting spin boosts from them. This is when I believe the tour version of this track has done a better job because of these being treated as actual obstacles to avoid, and the gliding section actually took you higher compared to the BCP's version. I would appreciate this track more if they have gone this route, but otherwise it stays this low on my list. But from what you've seen from this one in the past entry, you may see a pattern going on. 91, Bone Dry Dunes. This was the worst track in the original base game due to its aesthetics. The layout is fine, but I'm not a fan of the theme. Also, for those of you who haven't known, Dry Bowser and Dry Bones weren't added to the game until the second Wii U DLC and the release of the 8 Deluxe game respectively. So, having a track without these two sort of felt weird to me originally. But today, this track still feels boring to race on. The only thing I could probably comprehend about this is that the music sounds unique to the track, making it feel like I'm actually racing in an Arabian desert. But otherwise, it's just another track that doesn't stand out to me, as I much rather prefer to race on newer tracks than this one back then. 90 SNES Donut Plains 3. Unlike SNES Mario Circuit 3, at least this SNES track looks more visually appealing. The music also fits more to its current day aesthetic, unlike Mario Circuit 3. But, however, out of all the original retros added into 8's base game, this is the weakest out of all the tracks that have been added. But it's still a simple layout with more added features like an underwater section. Timing is everything when it comes with mushrooms, as they can make or break your race, especially with this type of track. But otherwise, I have nothing else to say. It's a short, sweet, and simple track to race on. 89 GCN Dry Dry Desert. This was another track that didn't speak out to me. Despite being called Dry Dry Desert, it's ironic for the developers to add in an oasis near the end of the track. Now, I never grew up playing the original Double Dash game, and I've only experienced people playing it online or through watching it with my own eyes, but I haven't fully actually sat down playing the entire game of Double Dash. I never grew up with the GameCube. But I wish they added in the tornadoes as well as that one giant piranha plant in the quicksand area towards the middle portion of the track. But otherwise, the music fits the theme perfectly, and the aesthetics feel nice overall, but there are still better tracks to race on in my humble opinion. 88 GBA Sky Garden. Now, I've owned a Game Boy in the past, but I've never owned Super Circuit. But I've loved this track playing it on Mario Kart DS as a retro. In fact, it was my favorite retro to race on in the DS. However, the Booster Course Passes version of this sort of felt different to me. The layout doesn't feel the same as the original, and the orange road definitely doesn't stand out to me compared to the gray stones in the original and the DS version. This is also why I feel like the tour version seems better visually, because it looks similar to its original. Plus, there are missed opportunities to add in anti-grav moments, especially with that final turn before the gliding section. The Booster Courses Passes version of this also doesn't feel like Sky Gardens to me. And knowing that others would say that Sunset Wilds didn't have the sun setting every lap, Sky Garden was my version of Sunset Wilds, with it being nothing like the original. The only saving grace is its music, as I could imagine it as a current version of how Sky Garden would sound like today. It's too bad that the track says otherwise. 87 Tour London Loop. This one falls in the same category as Tokyo Blur, as it's just another track where you could just race on the road. However, the music makes this track stand out more than Tokyo Blur, as it sounds like British rock is blasting through, while Tokyo Blur literally almost just sounds generic. Otherwise, London Loop feels like another track racing on the roads, and that's pretty much it. Other than the music though, I appreciate the chain chomps and that one grass shortcut in the first and final laps behind that one giant chain chomp. Otherwise, it's fine for what it is, honestly. 86 Water Park. Now this has a cool aesthetic to it, as it feels like you're actually racing in a theme park. However, the rest of the track is just boring and generic to race on. It's nice to interact with that sub-coaster by bumping into it for that extra speed boost, and on that same turn too, you could obtain a purple drift. And the really cool thing I also like about it is that final gliding section when you're heading towards the Ferris wheel. But it's still a boring track. At the same time, it's got really cool aesthetics. However, for a Mushroom Cup track overall, at least it fits as one of the easiest tracks to race on. 85 Sweet Sweet Canyon. Speaking of a Mushroom Cup track that fits in, Sweet Sweet Canyon gets the one-up due to the setting and the split paths towards the latter portion of the track. Now, compared to Sky High Sunday though, at least the track layout feels much more fun to race on. But what holds it back for me is its music, as although it fits with its theme, I appreciate Sky High Sunday's theme even more, and even Water Park's music. But at least it's more fun to race on compared to those two. But between the blue and the pink paths, which path do you guys prefer taking? I'm more comfortable with the blue path, but I use the pink path for time trials. 84 Tour Paris Promenade. Now this is the first track you race in the Booster Course Pass, and for a starter track, it's not as bad as I thought. I like the music and the aesthetics, especially with the gliding section in the beginning and driving under the Eiffel Tower. But what caught me the first time was that third lap where the red arrows are pointing to the right and going through the track backwards. Now that was fun. If you're way up in front and you reach this section, you may want to try to avoid other racers and items, especially with the bullet bills. But if you come in with a bomb and you start blasting racers at that portion, that's when it gets really fun. But despite being in Wave 1, it doesn't feel like a Wave 1 track compared to the other tracks, but other tour tracks are still more fun to race on. 83 Tour New York Minute. This is the first track on the Tour mobile game, and compared to previous tour tracks, this one feels more pleasing to race on. The music also brings out jazzy New York City vibes, and plus, the layout of each lap is more fun to race on than the previous tour tracks mentioned, with the second lap reversing the park path, and the third lap, though odd, racing in the building and the parking lot of the building. But there are still other tour tracks that I appreciate racing on more than this one. 82 Tour Bangkok Rush. This tour track is fun to race on thanks to that beautiful sunset in the background. I also appreciate how you could race through the different levels, such as the beginning where you're either taking the upper path to visit the train station or the lower path on that paved road. The gliding section is also pretty fun on that second lap, and although weird, it's also fun driving up the parking lot building and bouncing off the kiosk roof, exiting it on the third lap. The only thing that's holding this track back is that spitting piranha plant seen in the tour version of the game, but it's not present in the Booster Course Pass. Otherwise, this is a fine track to race on. 81 3DS DK Jungle. This is probably another controversial take, but I'm not a huge fan of this track. I never owned the 3DS as well, so I've never experienced playing this track on its own original system. But playing on 8, I found this track not as fun as I hoped. I also don't play many Donkey Kong games, so I don't know if that's just my bias kicking in. But the only thing I like about this track is the music, as I feel like I'm racing in an actual Donkey Kong game. And as well as the aesthetics, obviously, but otherwise, I just don't know. I don't really gravitate towards this track other than the other tracks that are already in the game that are way more fun to play on. But at the same time, too, it's not a bad track, but it's not a go-to for me. 80 GBA Sunset Wilds. A lot of people would have this track way lower on their list or even be last for them. But for me, despite no actual sun setting, I'm fine with this track. Again, I never grew up with Super Circuits, so I've never experienced racing on this track firsthand, but I can understand why others would be upset about the feature of the sun not actually setting each lap. But for me, it honestly doesn't bother me, as I still enjoy racing on the layout and avoiding the dancing shy guys in the middle. Another factor I enjoyed about this track is its music, especially with the fiddle, as it fits with that Wild Western setting. However, I would also appreciate more if the sun setting feature was actually added to the game so that I could actually try experiencing it myself. It looked cool watching others people play it, even in the tour version, but if the developers ever update the game, it'll be a cool feature to include, other than, updating the textures just like in Toad Circuit. 79 Tour Amsterdam Drift. Another fine tour track with interesting layouts in each lap. Lap 1 stays on the road and glides into a field. Lap 2 drives underwater, and Lap 3 drives through a flowery meadow. I find it funny that if I ever visit Amsterdam, I think about the destination, going underwater, just like in the Mario Kart game. I don't know if they do that as an actual tourist attraction in Amsterdam, but it'd be kind of funny. As Scaprillis also said in his video, I find that this track isn't needed as there are too many tracks based in Europe. Otherwise, this track is fine, with the music sounding great, especially with the choir at the beginning. 78 Twisted Mansion. With the same initials as another favorite video game franchise of mine, Twisted Metal, this race course screams DS Luigi's Mansion's vibe to me. This track is fine for what it is, except for the underwater portion. And to me, that sort of felt unnecessary to include. But this track is like what Luigi's Mansion should have been in its first portion, with most of it being inside the mansion. But, however, if they included the outside portion of Luigi's Mansion, I'd appreciate the track even more. I wish they had renamed this track to a more Luigi's Mansion theme as well, because Twisted Mansion sounds sort of generic, and they would have added more Luigi representation in the game. The music is greatly theme-wise though. 77, Merry Mountain. The theming of this track is unique, but it's a track I could care less about whenever it's not the winter season. The layout is fine, but the most disappointing things about this track are the unneeded half pipe and the downhill portion of the actual mountain. It's like going down a roller coaster without any build up to it. The only thing I liked about Merry Mountain is the viaduct when going down that hill, because it reminds me of a gorgeous visual from Thomas and Friends from the episode Duncan the Humbug. Otherwise, this is an okay track with music that's fitting with its theme. 76, Dolphin Shoals. This is probably another controversial take, but I do not like Dolphin Shoals. I'm not a fan of driving underwater, and this track is a big example of that. Maybe it's a skill issue, but I'm not a fan of holding drifts in this track as well, especially with that beginning left turn. However, the best things I enjoyed about this track were tricking off that unagi and that sweet saxophone solo whenever you jump onto the land. If the track had that saxophone playing throughout all 3 laps throughout its entirety and not just the 3rd lap, I'd probably bump this placement up a bit more. 75, Ice Ice Outpost. I originally didn't care for this track and thought this was the worst track in the original Wii U DLC. But the more I raced on this track, the more I appreciated it. The downside is that despite the track's name, there's not much ice in the track. Otherwise, the split path is unique as it lasts 90% of the entire track, and finding which path to take is interesting, though I majority of times would take that green path. Plus, I appreciate that music a lot too. Overall, it's an okay track with stunning music and an okay layout. 74, Dragon Driftway. This was the opposite of Ice Ice Outpost, as this was a DLC track that I thought was one of the greatest in the original Wii U DLC. It ended up becoming more boring the more I raced on it. I appreciate it as the track tributes to Gobblegut, and the music fits the aesthetics well, but I don't know. I feel sort of bored every time I race on it. It does get the advantage from the previous tracks because of the layout, but otherwise, other DLC tracks in the original Wii U were more fun to race on compared to this one, well besides Excite Bike Arena. 73, GBA Mario Circuit. Another standard boring circuit track, but with one exception. The one U-turn being lifted with Ultra Hands. For some reason, it turns out that a standard boring racetrack has become a more visually appealing track to race on. Plus, with that Mario Kart 8 aesthetic, it feels more realistic to race on. The added gliding ramp is also intriguing, but I don't use it often personally. Otherwise, the music sounds a lot different from the Game Boy counterpart, but in my opinion sounds better in this version than its Game Boy counterpart. Again, this track is fine thanks to the added Mario Kart 8 touch-ups. 72, DS Cheep Cheep Beach. This track was fun to race on in the DS, but I find it less fun to race on in this version. I think the added water sections made the track a lot easier to race on, but compared to Dolphin Shoals, at least you spend less time underwater in this track. Otherwise, the music also fits with its theme, alongside the beginning gliding section with the Cheep Cheeps flying above your head. It's another fine track nonetheless. 71, GCN Sherbetland. Between the Double Dash tracks added in the original base game, Sherbetland had the bigger advantage. Ironically, what makes it stand out more to me is the underwater portions added to the track. The beginning section allows you to drive underwater and up the wall when approaching the cave section, but at the same time, the latter portion drops to avoid freezies and additional turns out of the surface level. However, though not necessary, I thought the gliding ramp was a fun inclusion, but the music also fits as well with the theming of this track. Otherwise, it's a fun track design and layout. 70, 3DS Piranha Plant Slide. I think this is an okay track. The layout is cool, the theming is nice, and the music fits in with the underground theme from the Super Mario Bros. Game. But I just don't know why. Again, I don't like this track as much as the other tracks in this game. The only portion I enjoyed about this track is that gliding section where you aim your cart up to land back on the track again. Otherwise, neat aesthetics and bopping music. 69. Tours Romavanti. This is a tour track that is fun to race on, but feels a little complex to navigate, especially for beginners. This track shows a little too much, but still looks pretty overall, if that makes sense. The backwards section in lap 2 seems a little more unexpected than Paris Promenades, but the overall theming and the music fit great. Especially when it comes to that third lap, when you're nearby those chain chomps in the Coliseum, you're gliding in the air and you pass through fuzzies, and you also have to deal with rocky wrenches on the ground on the first and third laps. But to be fair, at least this is the only track in the game that actually features fuzzies and rocky wrenches. 68. GBA Boo Lake. An unexpected track that looked plain in the original, only to turn out as one of the more impressive looking tracks visually. The best thing about the track is the actual lake while driving underwater. Plus, it uses anti-gravity to its advantage by tilting some of the track. However, my favorite part is the final portion of the track, coming out of the water and tricking on those little platforms, landing back at the finish line and continuing on or finishing off the race. I also like the music that goes along with it. It provides an upbeat version of the Ghost Valley tracks, and it's surprisingly a fun track to race on overall. You can't go wrong with this one. 67. N64 Choco Mountain. Compared to the DS version of this track, this one has a great update, especially with the cave portion. I also haven't played the N64 as much, but visually, the Booster Course Pass has served its justice for the layout and the theme of this track. The music is also about to listen to while racing in the track. I think that this track is still low on my list overall, but I still have fun racing on this track regardless of the placement. 66. GBA Riverside Park. The Booster Course Pass was the first time I've ever experienced this track, and it delivered. The track's layout is fun to race on, and avoiding the walking piranha plants, or patuis, is also fun. What makes it unique is that if a patui is holding an item, like a mushroom or a banana, you can hit it and it will drop the item. But the music also fits with that jungle theme aesthetic. If I were to be critical about this track though, is that the colorful blocks look off in that jungle setting. I mean, it looks fine in the original, but it looks off-putting in the Booster Courses Passes version. Otherwise, this is also a fun track to race on. 65. Tour Berlin Byways. This is when I started enjoying the tour tracks more, and this is all thanks to its music and layout. What I like about this track is the third lap with the timing of the womps and tricking off of them. Sort of like how Romavanti is unique with the inclusion of the fuzzies and rocky wrenches. Having womps makes Berlin Byways unique compared to any of the other tracks in this game. Because, well, this is the only track that actually features womps. Other than that, there's nothing else to say. It's a fun and unique track that gets the job done. 64. N64's Toad's Turnpike. Another figure 8 track, but with traffic. I have rarely tried the original version of this game on the Nintendo 64. I've only played it like once, but I feel like it's more fun to race on in that version compared to 8's counterpart. However, to give credit where it's due, I appreciate the trucks with the gliding ramps, especially when you time it over the bridge or the tunnel section in the middle of the map. That's what makes it unique about this track. Plus, the anti-gravity on the walls is also pretty fun inclusion. But despite the downgrade from its original, I still appreciate the track for what it is, even though it's 10 times easier to race on in this version compared to the Nintendo 64 version. 63. DS Wario Stadium. The layout of this track is superb compared to its original DS design. With the anti-gravity, the underwater, and the gliding sections implemented, the track feels more alive. Plus, the music is still a banger to listen to. And that added Wario statue looks amazing. Honestly, it gives me the Mario Kart Stadium vibes, and overall, this is a fun track to race on. 62. GBA Cheeseland. Compared to its other GBA DLC inclusion from the original 8 game, this one gets the shorter end of the stick. However, it's still fun to race on. Comparing this one to its Super Circuit version though, this one sort of feels off. In Super Circuit, it actually feels like you're racing on the moon made of cheese. But in this version, it feels like you're racing on a desert that's actually made of cheese. I mean, this bagging track is fun, with multiple trick opportunities and fun shortcuts to attempt with mushrooms. It's fun to race on, it's hard to master, but it makes it all the more challenging when you're trying to maintain a solid lead. 61. Animal Crossing. Between all the other crossovers in this game, this track is the weakest in my opinion, well, excluding Excitebike Arena. I don't think this track is horrible by any means, it's just not as captivating compared to the other Nintendo themed tracks. However, the usage of the 4 seasons plays a big advantage to the track, with each variation playing slightly differently from the others, as well as their music fitting each of their themes perfectly. If you're interested in my personal rankings on these variations, the weakest in my opinion is winter, followed by autumn, then spring, and then summer being my favorite. Each is great to play on, with each variation being unique overall. 60. Wild Woods. A unique track where you feel like a bug roaming around the trees and the woods. I like the anti-gravity usage in this track, as you already start off in anti-gravity while you're climbing the tree. Then later on, zipping down on a stream of water, making it fun to race on as well. And plus, I also originally thought that this was one of the weaker tracks in this game, but I come to enjoy this track every now and then. Conversely, the music shines, especially with the Shy Guy singing in the background. Otherwise, this track is a fun time, design-wise and race-wise. 59. Piranha Plant Cove. This is a fun underwater course, despite me not enjoying underwater courses as much. The aesthetics and the music are all great, along with the theming of the track. Each lap has a different variation, with each fun to race on. However, my favorite part is that gliding section. Otherwise, there's nothing much to say. It's a nice track. 58. Tour Vancouver Velocity. I enjoy the track's outdoor portions, especially on the first lap, turning into anti-grav and then driving across the bridge and then gliding off into the next section. The music also fits the ambiance perfectly. Otherwise, it's a fine tour track with various sections and even an ice skating portion with Shy Guys in the ice rink. Overall, I really enjoy the atmosphere, and plus it's a better tour track than the ones that I previously mentioned. 57. Super Bell Subway. As a train fan, I feel like I should enjoy this track a bit more, but I think this track is just fine. Avoiding the different subway trains is fun, and the music also hits. The subway portion also gives me that underground vibes from the Super Mario Bros. Games. Otherwise, I don't usually like to take those ramps or the gliding sections, as I feel like those methods are slower. But I still like racing on this track, avoiding the trains, and basically, I think this is just as fun, but there's another train track, no pun intended, that I like slightly more than this one, which I will mention later on. 56. 3DS Rock Mountain. This is a fun track, especially regarding its gliding sections, obviously. Plus, if you got mushrooms stored, shortcuts are more accessible when needed. The music also hits, fitting its rock theme aesthetic. The only downside with this track that I have is that it still has those Wave 1 graphics with the rock and grass textures looking bland, sort of like, Toad Circuit. Otherwise, it's a fun layout and the atmosphere is great to race on, especially that if you feel like you want to cruise in the air for a bit. 55. DS Shroom Ridge. Speaking of Wave 1 graphics, this track's textures are off compared to the base game's counterparts. However, what makes this track stand out to me the most is its music, which is the best coming out of Wave 1. The Booster Courses Passes version drives the original DS's version's music out of the water. But the layout is still fun to race on, especially when it comes to those wavy turns in the beginning and that little fun glider section towards the middle portion, and even near the end of the track where you could trick off those pipes so that you could gain extra speed boosts. This track basically has great music, has a great layout, but if the graphics were to be updated just a slight bit to match its base game's counterparts, then this track would rate higher on my list. 55. Wii Moo Moo Meadows. This version is a great update compared to its Wii counterpart. The sunrise atmosphere, the more muddy design, and the updated music are way better than the original. The gliding section towards 3/4 of the track was the only unnecessary thing added. Besides that, I think that this is a perfect retro track. It's better than the original Wii versions, that's for sure. 53. Mario Circuit. Taking a Mobius strip and racing the figure 8 2 times per lap is an interesting concept. It's fun design-wise, but the music carries the track for me, especially with that sweet saxophone solo. However, this music fits well with another track that I'll get into. Otherwise, this is a fine track, but not the best Mario Circuit track in this game, which again, I'll get to it in a bit. 52. Hyrule Circuit. Despite not being a fan of Legend of Zelda, I enjoy this track's references and design, with the Piranha Plants being replaced by Deku Babas, Swoopers being replaced by Keys, and of course, the coins being replaced by rupees. Besides the gliding section near the beginning, my favorite part about this track is hitting those 3 pillars to unlock the hidden shortcut by going through the Master Sword. This music is such a banger too, especially with a faster and a more upbeat tune to the original Legend of Zelda theme. Honestly, it was a great track to race on when it originally released as a DLC track for the Wii U, and it's still great to race today. 51. 3DS Rosalina's Ice World. This is the most unexpected track to come into the Booster Course Pass, besides another track that I'll be bringing up later on. I thought that this was a solid track the first time playing this, especially when it comes to those hat pipes in the middle section. The music is also very whimsical, which fits this track very well. The observatory at the beginning of the track is also a fun inclusion to make it more Rosalina themed, though I wish we had Piranha Plant Pipeline. This track still definitely delivers. 50. DS Mario Circuit. Despite not having tracks such as Airship Fortress, Delfino Square, or even Luigi's Mansion, they needed more Luigi representation anyways. This Mario Circuit somehow became my favorite in the game. This version has Piranha Plants spitting fireballs and a Wiggler roaming the track on the 3rd lap. Honestly, this version's design is way better than the DS counterpart. Despite having the Wave 1 graphics, this is still a fun race to race on. I thank Albert Boris for this, by the way. He allowed me to see a new light on this track. 49. N64 Royal Raceway. This track is fun to race on aesthetically, especially with its Sakura pedals raining down the track, and plus that updated music is such a hit. The best part is the gliding section over the river, and along with those hot air balloons floating in the sky, it makes it all the more pleasing and fun to look at. Unfortunately, we can't drive into Peach's castle, but it's still a fun track nonetheless. 48. Mario Kart Stadium. Reaching the halfway point, let's start off by talking about the first track you get to play in this game. Honestly, this is my favorite starter track throughout the entire Mario Kart series. I enjoyed the nighttime atmosphere and the first usage of anti-gravity, but the music really got me the most. The orchestra did not disappoint, especially when listening to this catchy tune. That electric guitar solo that you get to hear on that 2nd lap hypes me whenever I race on this track. That's why I think this tune fits this track better than Mario Circuit, but this is such a great track for a starter and a great way to start off this game. 47. Wii Grumble Volcano. This track carries over from the Wii's version, but this version makes the atmosphere more darker and eerier. Like the Wii version, however, each lap has the track slowly falling apart, making it more challenging to race on. But if you know your lines, this race can be fun overall. The only thing I wish they had was the inclusion of that one super shortcut in Wii, where you literally just drive up onto a piece of rock on the side, race around it 3 times, and you would literally finish the race in under 30 seconds. But other than that, the music is great, and the atmosphere feels intense. This is such a fun track to race on. 46. N64 Yoshi Valley. This is a fun track with different routes and strategies to either make or break your race. However, I almost always take the bridge path because 8 Deluxe is the easiest game to control compared to the past Mario Kart games. The music is also very fast paced, especially with that violin that hits, especially when that third lap comes in. It'll be cool to have the placement marks hidden, as well as the character icons being blacked out like in the original. It will make the track more unique, but overall, it's still a fun track to race on regardless. 45, GCN DK Mountain. Now, here's probably another controversial take since it's not high in my placement. But I still like this track regardless of its current placement. Though I wish that Dino Dino Jungle was added instead, this track was still fine for what it is. It's cool that you could trick off the actual mountain and not like those little ramps like they did in the Wii version. And the neat little shortcut you could pull off at the end before the bridge section is also pretty fun. However, as Nathaniel Bandy also says, this track sort of feels easier than its previous versions, but it's still enjoyable nonetheless since, of course, it is DK Mountain. The music upgrade is also okay, but it still sounds close to its original version. However, this isn't my favorite DK track to race on. 44, Thwomp Ruins. I enjoy the atmosphere of this race and its theme. Racing on this track also feels whimsical, with the thwomps trying to crush you while you're racing. But my favorite parts of this race are the gliding sections. One before the finish line, right here, and the one on the second or third lap while you're trying to avoid that giant thwomp that's going to squish you in between, as well as the rolling barrel that's coming towards you. However, the best part about this track is its music, especially with that little flute solo when you're about to enter lap 2. It deserves to be the last race of the Mushroom Cup, as it's easy for beginners and professional players alike. 43, Wii Daisy Circuit. Again, I like the atmosphere of this race, especially with the sunsetting vibes in the background. Everything feels calm and collected to race on. However, the one thing that holds it back for me is its music, because the Wii's versions with the piano seems more captivating rather than the xylophones used in the Booster Course Pass. Another nitpick is the unnecessary little jump ramp after exiting the tunnel. Other than that, it's still a fun race overall, despite Daisy getting another race added to the game. Man, they did Luigi dirty because he has no track dedicated to himself in the base game and in the Booster Course Pass. Mario has another circuit, Peach has one, Daisy has 2 tracks, Toad has one, Donkey Kong has 2, Bowser has one, and even Waluigi has 2 tracks. All in the Booster Course Pass, by the way. But then again, even in the base game, Luigi has none, and in the Booster Course Pass, Luigi also has none. Luigi literally gets nothing. I really hope they bring him justice in the next Mario Kart game. 42, Tour Los Angeles Laps. This tour track is pretty fun as it's one giant race which consists of 3 sections, unlike the previously mentioned tour tracks. The first 2 laps are driving around in the pier, the sandy beaches, and through the baseball stadium, which is really fun. But the third lap takes a turn for the worse as it goes around in an oil field. Now, I don't understand why the developers didn't go for a Hollywood-like aesthetic, like what some other YouTubers mentioned, but I guess this track is fine. But on the other hand, the music is still a bop, despite missing the little vocals in the beginning, like in the tour version of the game. But this is also just a nitpick. Other than the little bops from that music, I wish they kept the Sunset Skybox, just like in the tour version. Otherwise, I still like racing around this track regardless. 41, 3DS Neo Bowser City. Again, I've never played the 3DS version of this track, but comparing how others played this and the 8's version of this game, 8 is way more fun to race on, especially since there are no puddles to slip on. But what makes it more fun for me is mastering those really tight turns on the halfway portion and the ending portion of the race, despite the slipperiness due to the rain. I also enjoyed the remix on this version with Toad's Turnpike and the mixture of MK7's theme, which is so cool to listen with 8's orchestra. Some people despise this track, but I enjoy it. 40, Toad Harbor. This track's atmosphere is great to race on, My favorite part is going on that downhill portion, trying to figure out what to do. Whether you're going down straight all the way, or maybe you're taking those ramps and tricking off the trolleys for some additional speed boost, or maybe you're actually hitting the sidewalks with the little jump boost on the right side or the additional speed boost panels on the left side. Up to you and what you want to do. But for me, I also feel like this music also carries the track. And it also gives out that vibe that you're actually in San Francisco touring around the area. Now, I feel like this is also worthy of being a Flower Cup track. And hopefully it comes back in a future Mario Kart game. But when it comes to Toad tracks that deserve to be in the next Mario Kart iteration, I really hope that belongs to Toad's Factory. Although this is also a worthy contender. 39. Tour Madrid Drive. This track is great with its atmosphere and its music. The guitarist goes hard in this version and it really delivers. Driving in different locations from the market to a museum to the fountains and a football/soccer stadium, this track has a good variety of everything. I guess what compares this to Roma Vanti is the skybox and a more forgiving track layout. It has a sleeping wiggler on the first lap only to wake up and move in the second portion. It's a fun tour track, but there are other more fun tour tracks out there to race on. 38. Electrodrome. I feel that this track not only fits in as a dance floor setting, but even like in an arcade setting as well. This track gives me those vibes for a guy who likes to play Dance Dance Revolution in the arcades. Plus the layout is fun, especially when it comes to those split paths and then at the end with the synthesizers playing towards the end of that path. And the music is also such a bop, especially seeing the Mario enemies rave on that big screen alongside with the piranha plants towards the end of the race. It's not my favorite music-based track in this game, but it's still a boppin' track regardless. And yes, the pun is intended this time. 37. Bowser Castle. This version of Bowser's Castle is surprisingly not my favorite in the game, but I appreciate what it was going for. The best part of this track is that giant Bowser statue that's punching the track, which will give you chances to create mini trick opportunities for extra speed, and it sort of gives me up that vibe from Wii and Double Dash when it had that giant Bowser statue spitting fireballs on the track. But the music also carries this track for me, especially with that rocking electric guitar. It's a fun version of Bowser's Castle with its own unique theming. 36. N64 Calamari Desert. Again, as a fan of trains, I feel like I should enjoy this course more. Thankfully I do, as the layout allows you to race normally on the first lap, only to change things up on the second and third laps. Racing against the train is so much fun, and trying to avoid it and not to get hit is a bit of a challenge. The music also hits with that Wild West setting. However, the only thing that bothers me about this course is that gigantic metal ramp that you see in the second lap. I thought the inclusion of that wasn't even supposed to be necessary, because we already have those blue arrows guiding the racers where to go anyways. Otherwise, I still enjoy this track regardless. 35. GBA Snowland. This is one of my favorite snow-themed courses in this game. The atmosphere feels whimsical, yet again, alongside with the catchy music accompanying it. Plus, I love how the theme for Nintendo 64's Choco Mountain fits in with the aesthetics only to match the theme for this setting, obviously. The best part of this track is that secret shortcut where you get to cut a gigantic portion of the track towards the beginning section so that sometimes if you're far behind, you could skip like 5 placements ahead so that you could go ahead and maintain that lead. At least for this one too, compared to the GBA counterpart, the screen doesn't shake. Then again, that screen shaking, looking when others YouTubers play it, didn't bother me personally, but I know others do get affected by it. But for me, I'm fine with it. That's just me though. 34. Tour Sydney Sprint. The vibrant colors and that bop of a theme that plays throughout the entire race is a lot better than it needed to be. Driving into the Sydney Opera House and even gliding back into the Sydney Opera House on the third lap is so cool. But if I were to nitpick on a negative, it would be this portion on the first lap where you're literally just driving straight for absolutely nothing. Yes, I know that you were able to trick off those ramps in the second and third lap, but it sort of just makes the first lap feel like it's nothing. Otherwise, this is such a great tour track. 33. Wii Wario's Gold Mine. This track is such a blow up from its original from the Wii, in my opinion. The biggest difference is the mine carts being used for spin boosts, while in Wii, if you hit one, then you flip out. Maybe I got too accustomed to the 8's version because I enjoy racing on this track more compared to the Wii version. But other than that, the music gets to me, especially when you enter in the cave and the Shy Guys start humming along to the tune. So it's really fun, honestly. That's why I prefer playing this version more than the Wii's version. But then again, whether if you're playing on this one or on the Wii, they're both great regardless. 32. GCN Baby Park. Now, I bet a lot of you thought that this race would be on my lower half of the list, but out of all the oval tracks, this one is my favorite. It's much better than its DS counterpart, that's one thing for sure, as it goes back to its 7 laps, just like in the original Double Dash version. And plus, being an anti-gravity makes the race more fun. However, with custom items, this track goes bonkers without knowing who will come out the victor in the end. Short, fun, and hectic. 31. 3DS Music Park. I enjoy racing on this track, especially with the different musical instruments, well, according to its theme, that goes along with it. The best part, in my opinion, are those bouncing music notes towards the latter portion of the track, where you either glide beside them or you stay on the ground and time the beat to when they hit the ground so that you could get an additional jump boost from them. The music also helps carry the race too, as depending on what you race on, from the pianos to the xylophones, you also have those playing alongside the actual music with the track. Now, it's a head-bopping theme. The track is so much fun to race on with the different musical instruments and those bouncing music notes. This is a fun track to race on for darn sure. 30. GCN Yoshi Circuit. This is a fun track as it's the shape of a Yoshi, obviously. I enjoy the different turns in this race, especially towards the beginning portion, alongside with that awesome waterfall shortcut. Plus, this is one of my favorite remixes in the entire game. Maybe better than the original, especially with that wonderful saxophone. However, if I were to nitpick on something, it would be that this version's second shortcut isn't present. But since I'm not familiar with the original Double Dash game, I don't know if that really makes a difference when it comes to using the shortcut. Otherwise, this is definitely my favorite circuit track in the entire game. 29. Mute City. Coming from the F-Zero series, this track is one of the most fast-paced courses in the game, with the track being almost filled with speed boosts. However, this is a great track to race in 200cc because of its intense speed. Racing in the Blue Falcon and hitting all the speed boosts in 200cc definitely feels so rewarding. The music also feels futuristic and energetic as well. But, however, my favorite part of this track is the hidden shortcut near the end of the track. It's a fun, fast-paced track to test your vehicle's speed, handling, and control. 28. DS Peach Gardens. I enjoy racing on this version of the track. Despite the garden section being more defined in the Wii and the original DS versions, the Booster Course Pass track makes up for it with the character-shaped hedges in the middle and the ability to drive backwards on the third lap. The music also sounds the same as its past iterations, but it's fine fitting in with its comfort of the track. It's a fun track to race on, and racing backwards on the third lap really makes up for it. 27. Wii Coconut Mall. You might see a pattern where I place specific Wii and Wii Retro tracks on my list. But this version of Coconut Mall is not my favorite, unlike the original. But this is still fun to race on regardless. The only thing that's holding me back are the visuals that are sort of deterring me from liking this version, and the cars doing donuts instead of moving back and forth like what they do in 7's and the original Wii version. But the music also sounds the same as the original. But despite these changes, I still enjoy racing on this track, and it still feels like it's racing on Coconut Mall. I mean, it is Coconut Mall, right? To be fair though, I still prefer the Wii's over this one, but this one's still good regardless, so I don't know. 26. Wii Mushroom Gorge. Another fun Wii track to race on. Combining the original with 7's, the bounciness of the mushrooms feels unique and fun to race on. Instead of 2 paths in the cave, now there's 3 paths to take, with the 2 outer paths remaining the same as the original Wii's version, with the middle being blue, which means that you could use the glider. But the best part is that shortcut at the end of the track. But for me, I can't pull it off successfully. It's probably a skill issue, but everything about this course is a fun improvement. The music is as catchy as the original, so no worries there whatsoever. 25. Shy Guy Falls. This is a fun track to race on. From climbing up the waterfall to racing down the waterfall, it's an exhilarating experience overall. The best part for me is racing down that waterfall and entering the gliding section. And then whether you could go to a small tunnel at the top or taking that standard path below, it's up to you. But for me, I prefer that top path, maybe because it's a slight bit faster. The music also brings color to this course as well, especially the wind instruments and the strings. But the best part, like Wild Woods and Wario's Gold Mine, is the timing of the Shy Guys singing to the tune. It's a great track with a great tune to go along with it. 24. SNES Rainbow Road. Out of all the Rainbow Roads in this game, this one is the weakest. But do I think this is bad? Nope. I enjoy racing on this course. The colors are vibrant, and the thwomps added to the tracks makes this race way more fun. The music's remix is one of the best out of all the other former SNES Rainbow Roads. Despite being the worst Rainbow Road in this game, it is still this high on my list. It's short and it's sweet for a track that's so atmospheric to race on. 23. Ninja Hideaway. This track surprised me when I first played it. This was also another course when playing it originally. I despised the track, but after learning the track more and more, I started to enjoy racing on this track more often. My favorite part of this track is that gliding section after passing those 3 Shy Guys and trying to aim towards the top level for a shorter path. Of course, I failed on my first attempt, but that's still my favorite part of the entire section. The theming is also really intriguing with the Japanese-like ninja theme, and that music is stellar, making me feel excited every time I race on it. It's hard and challenging to navigate, but it's fun to race on overall. 22. Wii Moonview Highway. This was the other track that we did not expect in the Booster Course Pass. The Wii representation may be too much, but I still enjoy this race. I enjoy the atmosphere and the music that comes with it, and to be fair, I think this remix sounds better than its original Wii counterpart. The only downside with this course is that it feels a little too easy compared to Wii's, but it still feels like a better Wii Retro to race on in 8 Deluxe, let alone the Booster Course Pass. 21. GCN Waluigi Stadium. Another fun retro course to race on. This track looks the most visually appealing compared to its previous counterparts. Plus, the track is amped with more trick opportunities to land on platforms to help or hinder a race. I like this track's aesthetics because it feels like I'm actually racing on a dirt bike stadium with bopping music in the background. Again, it's great that Waluigi gets more representation, but poor Luigi doesn't. Well, at least you get to race against him in 200cc in time trials mode in this race. 20. Tour Singapore Speedway. Every Mario Kart YouTuber I've seen has this tour track as their favorite, and I sure can't agree with that. The visuals and the track layout are fun to race around, with my favorite section being the glider sections. And I mean all of them. It feels like you get that side of Singapore while you're gliding in the air. Plus, that music to go along with it fits the theme so well. If I were to nitpick on the downside, it would probably be the Chinatown section. But it's still fine regardless. This track makes me wish that I could actually visit Singapore one day. 19. DS TikTok Clock. Take my favorite course in the DS game and amp it up to 1000 in the 8's version. I enjoyed this setting and how everything is spruced up to seem more authentic to its level setting. With the clock seeming to look old-fashioned, it seems fascinating. The updated music sounds much better than its original counterpart, with that catchy beat and the head-bopping tune. But my favorite part is the added gliding section over the blue and red cogs towards the middle of the course. Otherwise, I really much have nothing negative to say about this track because this was my favorite course in the DS. 18 GCN Daisy Cruiser. This track is unique for being set on a cruise ship in the middle of the sea. Again, I've never played Sevens or the original Double Dash's version of this track, but this was a fun track to race on. My favorite part, ironically, is the underwater section that somehow feels faster when taking that route. The vibes and the music feels serene and relaxing when driving around. Plus, the moving tables of the Yoshis, Toads, and the Shy Guys put an extra challenge, especially trying to find a consistent racing line. It's a great track overall, especially for its theme. 17. Sunshine Airport. Driving at an airport is a fun concept, and this track delivers on it. It's great from the short indoor section of the airport to driving around and in and out of planes. But the best part is the gliding section where you take off with the planes or fly below or above them. The music fits the theme as well, as the little details such as the attendant on the loudspeakers telling passengers about the different tracks in the game, it's a really nice detail to include. 16. Cloud Top Cruise. This is the booster course passes Sky Garden done right. The different sections, whether you're on the beanstalk to the fluffy white clouds, on an airship, or in the thunderclouds, made this track more unique than it had to be. My favorite section involves navigating through the thunderclouds without being zapped by a shock, of course. Plus, that final glide before the finish is also a great touch to go along with it. The music, remixing Gusty Garden Galaxy, was also a great rendition. Whether an orchestral version or the rock version in the Thunderstorm, it's such a great track aesthetically and layout wise. 15. Tour Athens Dash. This tour track is my favorite tour track in the Booster Course Pass. I love the atmosphere in this course, and what makes it stand out compared for the rest is the overall layout of the track. The other tour tracks feel like I'm exploring in a car, but with Athens Dash, I feel like I'm actually walking around, touring around in a little bike like Link is right now. The music is also bright and peppy, matching the track's atmosphere, and overall, it's such a fun drive to explore this place. It makes me want to think about going to Greece one day. 14. Wee Koopa Cape. Many people don't like this version of the track, but I'm on the opposite side of that spectrum. I enjoy the new updates, from that catchy music to that river ride, and even the green shell bouncing back and forth on the finish line. But if I were to nitpick, the spinning, shrinking electric line should also be added in this version inside the pipe portion of the track. Otherwise, this track still feels like Koopa Cape to me, and it has nice updates to go along with it. Despite the Wave 1 graphics on some of them, I still enjoy this. 13. DS Waluigi Pinball. DS TikTok Clock is my favorite DS track, but I like the vibrant colors and visuals on this track more in 8 Deluxe. Everything here screams Waluigi Pinball and fits perfectly for a newer aesthetic. The only thing I wish they had done with this track is add more anti-gravity portions, and every time you go inside that pinball machine again, it makes that roulette sound effect like in DS and 3DS. Otherwise, racing against the pinball is pretty fun, and despite the music being the same as in Mario Stadium, I honestly don't mind it. It's a fun track to race around. I mean, it's Waluigi Pinball. You can't go wrong with this track. 12. GBA Ribbon Road. This track received a massive blow up from its Super Circuit counterpart. The track is split into 3 ribbon sections, with the red part being part of the start and the finish line, the green consisting of obstacles, or otherwise in this case the Mecha Koopas, and the blue ones for the anti-gravity and the boost tricking. I enjoyed the whimsical music that matched the track. alongside with my favorite part being that gliding section when you're flying through towards the end while you're passing the Koopa clown heads in the Jack in the Boxes. Otherwise, being toy size in a kid's room with other toys in the background, such as those carts and that Kung Fu Lakitu poster, makes this really unique. 11. SNES Bowser Castle 3. I'm surprised that an SNES track nearly made it to my top 10, but this one is my favorite out of all the SNES tracks in the game. The track floating on the lava, the anti-gravity section, and the drivable walls makes this track so much fun. But the best part about this track is its music. That electric guitar slaps hard, making the track more energetic for racing. It's a great Bowser Castle track and a great pick to round off the booster course pack. Well, besides one, but again, we'll get to that one eventually. 10. Mount Wario. This track is a 3 bass section track, and it is a cool concept, no pun intended, starting in a helicopter on the top of a mountain, then racing to the bottom of the slopes. There's so many opportunities for different track routes and tricks for speed boosts. Plus, the music also shifts between the sections of each track. And plus, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only track that doesn't speed its music in the final lap or the final portion of the track. It makes this track fun to race on and tests how well you race. 9. Wii Maple Treeway. This was a great track to race on the Wii, so it was all the more fun to race in the Booster Course Pass. Unexpectedly, it came in early in the Booster Course Pass, but it still delivered with its beautiful fall aesthetics and its calming music to go along with it. If I were to nitpick on this course though, it's the size of the wigglers midway through. And I slightly prefer the Wii's music more than this one, but other than those, it's still a great track to race on, especially with the inclusion of the half pipe. 8. Rainbow Road. This may be my most controversial placement, but I enjoyed this game's version of Rainbow Road. I understand why it seems more of like a spaceship aesthetic, but I still enjoy it. My favorite part of this track is the split pad towards the middle and that shortcut jump. Otherwise, this track also has tight turns and a rocking soundtrack. That electric guitar and that synthesizer solo definitely stood out to me. So, even though there are those who still don't enjoy this track, I still do. Hence, being in my top 10. 7. Wii DK Summit. Now, this course is my favorite DK track, let alone my favorite snow track and my favorite track on the Wii. And they did a great job bringing this course back in the Booster Course Pass. Now, what makes this course fun are those half pipes at the end, as well as tricking off of them to gain extra boosts. If you're skilled enough, you can pull off that one big shortcut after those snow bumps. But if I were to nitpick on this track, I prefer the Wii's version of the music over this version, but it's still a great remix nonetheless. 6. N64 Rainbow Road. My favorite retro track in the base game for a reason, and to this day, it is one of the best tracks to race on. Compared to its Nintendo 64 counterpart, this is now a 3 bass section track instead of a 3 long lap track. I prefer the 1 lap track variation. Alongside with its pretty visuals and aesthetics with the city below, the fireworks of the various Mario characters, and the floating train in the sky with the toads dropping coins onto the track. I enjoyed that final glide section at the end, knowing that this race's journey had ended. Otherwise, it's a beautiful track overall, but not my favorite Rainbow Road track. 5. Big Blue. Like Mount Wario and N64 Rainbow Road, this is a 3-section based track that fits the theme of F-Zero. This track is my favorite out of all the original DLC from the Wii U and the Deluxe's original bass track selections. The visuals look futuristic, like Mute City, but add more such as conveyor belts, a flowing water section, a gliding section, and a split pathway towards the end. My favorite part is approaching that final section with the announcer shouting, "Yeah, the final lap!" along with the saxophone carrying the music. Overall, it's a fun, futuristic and exhilarating journey from start to finish. 4. Squeaky clean sprint. The Booster Course Pass had its mixed racetracks added to the game, but when they add in good racing tracks, they turn out to be great. This track is no exception for being one of the greatest originally designed tracks added to the game. Like Ribbon Road, the races are shrunk to toy-sized cars as we race around in the bathroom, from diving into the bathtub, driving in the drain, and gliding over an exploding toilet. Plus, the music that ties in along with this track sounds again whimsical. My favorite part of the track is taking the gliding section in the second and third laps. Despite having a poor taste of the Booster Course Pass initially, they tend to get better over time, with this one being one of, if not the greatest designs in Mario Kart history. 3. 3DS Rainbow Road. This was a great way to wrap up 2022 and Wave 3 of the Booster Course Pass. Not being able to play 7's original version of this course, I'm glad I could play it in the Booster Course Pass. It's a beautiful one-lap journey from tricking off ramps, drifting on Saturn's rings, tricking off the moon's craters, and tricking off of the spinning tube through the rings or through trick ramps. My favorite part of this track is definitely the final portion, whether you're gliding through the rings or you're tricking off from the tube and taking those ramps. But the music also carries it for me, as listening to this music references past Rainbow Road tunes such as Nintendo 64's, Super Circuits, and DS's. It's a great track to finish off half of the Booster Course Pass. 2. Yoshi's Island. Take one of my favorite Mario characters and enhance their world into a racetrack. Yoshi's Island is one of the best visually designed racetracks I've ever raced on. Astonishingly, each section of the track represents parts of the game Yoshi's Island. The references such as Poochie and the flower ring representing the goal at the end is such a great touch. The music also screams Yoshi's Island, with the intro and the ending music being unique, like the F-Zero tracks and the Animal Crossing track. However, my favorite part of this track is that flying question mark cloud and unlocking a hidden shortcut towards the end. It's hard to pull off, but if you master the timing, it's definitely gratifying. I wish this were a section track though, so that the developers can expand the track more and have the goal ring as the ending gliding section to the finish line. Otherwise, this track is perfect and fun to race on. 1. Wii Rainbow Road. I couldn't think of a better way to finish off the Booster Course Pass than taking Wii's most iconic track and concluding it with that very track. This course wasn't my favorite track originally on the Wii, but it was still fun to race on despite how challenging it was. The Booster Course Pass made the track simpler, but its aesthetics and music captivated and made me love it more. Every tiny detail is carried over from the Wii version, such as the star bits and that star cannon, and when you fall, they bring back the flames like you're a falling meteor falling towards Earth. I love everything about this track, but if I were to nitpick on something, I wish not all the track would be in anti-gravity and have some just be on standard wheels. Otherwise, as I remember from the Wii, this track is a great way to round off the Booster Course Pass and a final chapter for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And that's my ranking of all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking around and listening to what I have to say about my favorite racing game franchise. I am not an expert in the game, and I only use this game as one of my escapes from reality. It was a long and hard time trying to make this, especially preparing it for Mario Kart 8's 10th anniversary. But it was ultimately worth it. But again, these are my picks for the game. How about all of you? What are your favorite or least favorite tracks to play in this game? Otherwise, do you agree or disagree with my current ranking? Again, my list could change as time passes, but this is where it stands currently for Mario Kart 8's 10th anniversary. If you enjoyed what you saw, leave a like And if you want to see more content like this and other topics, such as podcasts, game board games, or ramblings like this, subscribe to the channel and leave the notification bell on to be notified when me or Caspen upload new videos to the channel. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye guys. Peace.